So welcome to Civility in the Workplace. This is Sheri Rogers with the Employee Development Analyst with the Human Resources Department in Training and Development. I'm glad you could join us today, and I'm so glad that we can finally get some things here online for those of you who weren't able to attend some of the sessions that were there on campus or in the ITV classes. So hopefully today I can give you some tools and some insights for turning what we already know about civility into some actions that we can all take to make some sustainable change. What I didn't want this to be, going on to our next slide here, what I didn't want this to be is another sort of Manners 101 workshop. I didn't want this to be sort of, something that you've already heard since you were a child, treat others the way you want to be treated, and I didn't want this to be too heavy on HR policies. I think we all have plenty of materials out there from our staff handbooks, faculty handbooks, our HR website and equal opportunity website for plenty of information that we have out there. But of course, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to contact me in HR or Debbie Zabawa in Equal Opportunity, and we'll be sure to get you some additional information if you'd like to. So let's talk about what this workshop actually is. It was intended to sort of build your knowledge base a little bit about civility. I know it seems to be one of those things that we should know about, and so we think we're good at it, but maybe some of those things that we can offer each other to help build our knowledge base a little bit and to be able to actually get out the civility that we have intended. And it's also, we'll talk a little bit about awareness, both about ourselves and of others, and hopefully this will aid us in having some effective and successful interaction to maintain the civility in our work groups, but also the civility around us in general. I also have the 3 R's up there: respect, restraint, and regard. This will be discussed as kind of guidelines for maintaining our civility. So let's move on. We all know what civility is, right? We can all think of a few words that we come up when we think about civility. And most of the time when I ask these questions, the words that most come up are things like responsibility, trust, support, acknowledgement, and respect. And of course, all those things are important to us, especially in the workplace. But let's think about why they're important for us and why we're striving for them all the time. And one of those is being for higher motivation, for the motivation from the connections that we make at work. We strive to make our work environment a good place to be, and then we're sort of motivated to maintain that around us. And once we have that good environment, then that comes out again in good customer service. And I know we hear customer service quite a bit in all of our areas around campus. But also the civility in our work environment helps provide a higher morale. And of course that morale translates into a higher camaraderie, and so we're more able to respect and support and trust each other through our responsibilities, building a sense of community, and so we also become more willing to be engaged in the work group and the work environment. So now that we know what civility is, let's think about what incivility is. So it seems to be, easier to think of the more negative things sometimes, but some of the words that comes up that remind us about incivility are words like rudeness, undermining, aggression, disrespect, personal agenda, working on something that we are only worried about for ourselves, and harassment, and that sometimes comes up, and I know we have some training on those as well. But the reason why we're worried about these things are because of results like high turnover, poor customer service, of course, low morale. I know we've talked a little bit in other trainings about burnout. If every day we're coming to work and we're constantly being beaten down by the incivilities of all those rudenesses, all the rudeness and the underminings, and so we start to become very burned out in our own positions, and then we no longer have that strive and that motivation to continue and grow further. Other things like bullying, we hear a lot about bullying in our school systems, but also a lot of the times that bullying comes out in our workplace as well. A small fact real quick, women are actually more likely to be bullied, but women are also actually more likely to be the bully. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but a little bit of statistics there for you. And of course, a higher amount of grievances. I know our Office in Human Resources have seen this firsthand because we operate a lot of those grievances and through those processes, and we know how cumbersome they can be for everyone involved. And the majority of the time, and not just Eastern Kentucky University, but everywhere in all organizations, many times grievances start out as something small, a small misunderstanding or miscommunication, and they escalate to the point that the two people or the work group is becoming very difficult to get along with, and so grievances then become this formal process to try to resolve that. A couple other statistics for you while we're still on this incivility slide. There was an international survey reported by Forbes.com that estimated that 37% of the workforce, which translates into about 54 million people, are bullied at some point in their careers. So close to half, or a little over a third, I suppose. And if you're familiar with Johns Hopkins University, you know that they have a civility initiative. And their studies repeatedly show that on a large amount of grievances started out as something unintentional, minor, misperceived, and then escalated, like I was saying before. And according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the estimated financial cost of workplace incivility, get this, is about $4.2 billion, yes, that's with a B, about $4.2 billion per year to organizations. And so we can certainly see how incivility is translated into all of these negative things across the spectrum. So let's move on a little bit. What is actually maybe causing this incivility? And so I've come up with a few things just in the research that I've done, but this is of course not conclusive or everything that's possibly causing civility, but I do want to touch on a few things. And the first one you'll see there is an increase in diversity. It's one of the suspected causes of the increase in incivility. And there might be a few factors at work here. You know, people find patterns in life, and this is how we explain the world around us. Unfortunately, many of those patterns are incorrect, especially when we put a label to a group, and this is, of course, stereotyping. And we may be aware of stereotyping, but what happens is a certain defense against it. And maybe in combination with so much sarcasm in the world, things like what we see on television, in the media, and the news, people always attacking, sometimes we can assume that even when somebody is being nice to us, if they're different for us, sometimes we assume that it's perpetuated by inequality, or that they're being fake, so to speak. You know, we talk about teamwork, and we also know that what we don't know may threaten us. And sometimes that threat develops into defensiveness and possibly working only to, cover our own selves and protect what is ours, and then sometimes protect our jobs. And so we sort of walk into the workforce sometimes with a shield and sword in hand, and we're constantly being defensive. And so even when someone is nice to us, sometimes we take it as being fake or nice for a personal agendaed reason. And this is going to kind of translate into the next point that I have here, is a need for cohesiveness in the workplace. And we hear a lot about teamwork, but we also know that in order for everyone to get along, we also have to find that solid ground that everybody can work on. And so we know that everybody is different from us, and we're supposed to celebrate their differences, but we're also supposed to get along and find that common ground. So it can be difficult for some people, because some people are very extroverted and they're willing to talk, and they're willing to talk about themselves and learn about other people, and some are not. And it may not be because of a negative reason, it may just be that they're private people, which makes it a little bit more difficult to work in a team setting and be cohesive in the workplace. And you can see there on that third one, an individualized world. Now this is working directly against cohesiveness. And there could be a lot of reasons why we perceive, especially maybe in Western socialization, being in an individualized world, because we have a lot of things that give us immediate gratification. If you don't like what's on TV, switch the channel. If you don't like what's on the internet, push of a button. If you don't like what's on your phone, get a higher package, and then you can surf the internet on your phone even. So we have a lot of ways that we can get what we want in a very quick way. Now we've also, in public school systems for the past probably 20 or 30 years, there's been this increasing of what some people call the trophy generation. And we're going to talk about generational gaps here in just a moment. But what we mean by trophy generation is people have grown up, for people my age, I'm in my late 20s, and I've heard a lot of, you can do what you want because you're special, and here's a gold star because you've tried. And so we kind of have grown up in this world of, as long as I try, as long as I want something, then I can do it and I deserve it, which may be creating some sense of entitlement, which is very difficult to work against when somebody doesn't get their way or doesn't get everything that they want it to go or how they want it to be. Then it tends to get a little bit difficult because they may be taking that as being rude. So that brings me to the fourth one, this exponentially increasing in generational gaps. I don't know if you know this, but there's about 4 generations in the workforce now. And all of the different generations could be operating on different things like loyalty, their importance of feedback, monetary reward, acknowledgement, and recognition. Someone in a younger generation probably wants a lot of feedback and operates a lot on reward, whether it be monetary or something else. Now, typically in a higher or an older generation, they work a lot more independently. They don't want a whole lot of direction from their supervisors. They want to come, they want to do their jobs, they want to know they're doing a good job, but they don't need a lot of that feedback. And so oftentimes if they have someone who is much younger than them, but they are in a higher, more supervisory position, then there may be a little bit of differences in how they want to operate and they work. What we've seen in the media and entertainment versus our morals and values starts to give us a battle of standards or a battle of expectations, kind of like what I was talking about with a younger generation person working with an older generation person. If the younger generation person is not rewarded often or not given frequent feedback, then they may be interpreting that as they are not valued, which may not be the case. It may just be that their supervisor, who may be much older than them, is just operating in a different way and isn't used to needing to give a lot of feedback. So let's look at that last one there. Uncertainty leads to anxiety. And I was kind of alluding to that earlier. But if we can think about what we don't know and what we don't understand, again, gives us a little bit of a threat. And that threat could be coming out as in our behavior as being withdrawn. Maybe we become angry, maybe we become defensive, but all of those are because we truly don't understand all of the different situations in their entirety. So to kind of capstone that, what's causing incivility slide, I want to give you a little bit of an example. And I tend to give a lot of my own personal experiences if you've been in my training, and this is one of them. There was an older gentleman that was offering me to help with my groceries. I was coming out of the grocery store and, putting a lot of groceries for my mother into the trunk, and so an older gentleman came up to me and offered to help me put my groceries in my car. Now, I didn't know the entirety of the situation. I didn't know this person, and so there my uncertainty came out in anxiety. I didn't know exactly what his agenda was. I didn't know if he was just to be nice or if he had other intentions. Now, so in explaining my uncertainties with assumptions, I went to the negative side and got very threatened and ended up probably hurting his feelings because I just brushed him off and said no thank you. But as he walked away, he said, I was just trying to help, and walked away. And it was later on when I kind of realized, I really was explaining my uncertainties with assumptions, and those assumptions are oftentimes incorrect. So, kind of give you a little bit of capstone for that slide to think about. But let's move on to the next. I want to talk a little bit about diversity. And diversity honestly could be and should be its own entire training and workshop. And there's plenty of materials out there. And we have a lot of people on campus like the Diversity Office, the Diversity Committee, Multicultural Student Affairs with George Gallion. And so we have a lot of people that are a little more of expertise in this subject than I am. But I know sometimes it helps a little bit to spark some thought with a visual. And so I have this visual here of an ice cap. And if we think about diversity, it is a lot like an ice cap in the sense that some of the visible diversity traits are things like clothes, body type. We can usually guess around age, gender, we can see somebody's behavior, we can see skin color, and we can see property. But like an ice cap, the majority of the diversities that somebody has, if we truly think about what diversity is in its entirety, The majority of diversity traits are really invisible traits. Things like value, religion, ethnicity, education, nationality, because again, ethnicity and nationality are two separate things. Somebody's religion, their military experience, other experience, sexual orientations, their habits, their debt. And that's a good example that I like to give people. We sometimes make a lot of assumptions about someone who has a lot of property. But the invisible trait to that is, what is their debt? We don't know because it's personal business. But again, that uncertainty that we're filling out with our assumptions and oftentimes going to that negative assumption will certainly lead to that incivility. And so oftentimes, the traits that are invisible are more valuable and sometimes more pertinent to what makes a person who they are than the visible ones. So let's move on to the next one. And here we can see a civility behavioral model. So here we have a model that intends to lead us to conduct civil behaviors. And the first there at the top will start with knowledge. And I say this in almost all of my trainings, that knowledge is the key to acceptance in any situation. So meaning that understanding of a situation or a person allows us to approach or deal with the situation with more confidence and more comfort, because we're able to understand the how and the why. Why is it happening? How to deal with it? Why is this person acting the way they are, and how do we approach it? And also know that people's behaviors are dependent on what they need, so we conduct ourselves so that we are rewarded. So you have to think, if somebody is behaving in a certain way, we then need to learn about what the other person's needs are. What are they looking for, and what are they looking to reward themselves with? So we then have a better idea of what we need to do to diffuse the situation once we understand more of it. And this leads to our self-awareness and also the awareness of others and how our behaviors affect the environment that we have created. So as we begin to understand and accept the facts of the interaction or the change or event or the situation, we have the chance to look inward and to analyze our own actions and emotions and thoughts, and to choose our reactions for the best outcome. And so then we begin to refine this analytical skill and build a tool set for knowing what sets us off, and how to explain our behaviors to others, and how to address others' uncivil behavior. That's our application. So now we've built our skill set, we're starting to apply it, and the more we apply our skills, the better we can become at having successful interactions, which leads to greater effective change. And the process then there continues, as there will always be people and situations to learn about. So let's move on and think about all of these things individually. And as we move through the first one, I want to give you a little bit of a scenario, because again, I like to give my own experiences as examples. So here's one. While sitting at a stop sign, the vehicle in front of me started to back up. And regardless of how I was trying to get the other person's attention, I was beeping, I was flashing my lights, the vehicle continued to back up until this person hit my car, but at a very low speed. So my passenger and I got out of my car, and the vehicle and driver passenger in front of us exited their vehicle as well. And we were looking over, and we noticed that there wasn't any damage done, but the vehicle's driver that was in front of me that hit me began to be very defensive and quickly escalated the situation into an argument and ended up saying something like, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to paint your whole car or something? Now, when I gave this in a live training before, everybody's reaction was, oh my goodness, I cannot believe what this person did. But let's move through a little bit, because again, we don't know the entirety of the situation. So let's move on to knowledge. And again, this is know versus what we do. So this is, again, trying to fill in the gaps about what we know about civility and what we actually do and what our behaviors are telling people. So there are many pieces that are unique to each situation, but there are some key points to consider when you witness or experience incivility to try and resolve the situation. Because again, we don't want to escalate, we want to go ahead and try to resolve the situation as best as we can. And the first is to think about what the other person is looking for in the situation, because again, our behavior are operating on the basis of needs. Are they being hostile because other events that have weighed them down? Are they emotional because of something outside the current situation? Is this person being seemingly rude because that's how they behave with their other friends and we're just perceiving it as rude? So how much of the current situation has actually sparked their current behaviors? So the next is understanding that uncertainty leads to anxiety again, and that anxiety leads to feeling threatened. It's part of our innate method of survival. If we don't understand it, we try to figure it out. And if it's threatening, then we do something about it. And this is when our amygdala kicks in. This is our fight or flight. So if we are threatened, then we try to do something about it. We might run, we fight, we flight, we freeze, any of those. And so this is how we have adapted to survive. And part of our adaptation and survival is developing patterns in the world. And this is how we've learned about our surroundings. It's how we've understood people and the places and the things around us. This is also for survival, but we still create patterns every day. And this is oftentimes how assumptions are created. So, the driver who hit my car could actually be acting uncivilly for a variety of reasons. I don't know. And the key here is to consider the possible reasons for the actions and respond in a way that will either diffuse the anger or at least not escalate the situation and to move towards a respectful solution. Again. So let's move on a little bit. That first thing, to be understood, we must seek to understand. So in order for others to understand our perception, meaning our emotions, our identity, our values, we must fully understand it ourselves. So try to take the time to understand why you hold things sacred. What do you protect? Why do you protect them? What are the things that are most important to you, and why is that so? The second part of that sentence is referring to the idea of putting effort into determining the reason why people are acting toward us the way that they are. That will then help us better choose our actions in response. Again, knowledge is the key to acceptance and learning how to deal with the situation at hand. So let's think about our scenario for a second. This again was actually my experience. Now, when I've told this scenario before, some people have said, oh, I would have called the police, or I would have gotten in my car, all very threatened types of reactions. Now, I will tell you that I really wasn't threatened because this person was actually a very elderly woman. So I wasn't physically threatened, but she just seemed to get very angry and very defensive very quickly. And so I wasn't able to get in the conversation much. It was just a lot of yelling at me. And so something kind of sparked in my brain and said, you know, I really don't think that this current situation has sparked this much outburst in her behavior. And so there has to be something else going on. And so I just kind of put my hands up for a minute in kind of a timeout motion. And I said, hang on a moment. And so she finally calmed down and took a breath and said, what? I said, did you hit my car? That's all I wanted to know. Did you hit my car? And she said, yes, I hit your car. So I said, why are you yelling at me? And I could see the change in her face, and she thought, oh gosh, you're right. I'm acting out. And so she ended up talking to me quite a while about all of these other things that were going on in her life, and she was just under a lot of stress. And I never had any intention of calling the police because, again, there was no damage to my vehicle, and there really wasn't a reason for me to get the police involved. And so I had to tell her, you know, that's all I wanted. I just wanted an apology. I just wanted you to acknowledge that, yes, you hit my car. So let's go home. It's dark. It's cold. Let's go. But just to let you know, in that situation, we actually ended up hugging. And she felt a lot better about it. And so I just told her, you know, be careful, go home, and try to work these things out. But it's okay. So in the second part of that know versus do knowledge, going back to the slide a little bit here, I know we've heard oftentimes to treat others how they want us to treat them. Oftentimes we've heard, you know, treat people how you want to be treated. But if we think about that sentence for a little bit, treat people how we would want to be treated. Now that may be okay at first, you know, certainly you don't want to be rude to, so you don't want to be rude to anyone else. But if we are to acknowledge and celebrate other people's differences, then we might not treat everyone else the exact same way that we would want to be treated, because we are not everyone else. So the second sentence there, treat others how they want us to treat them. So there may be some conversation that you need to have, is find out exactly how someone wants to be treated. And part of that conversation may be that third piece there. What does respect mean to you? And what does it mean to others? And oftentimes when you start having those kinds of conversations, you'll see that oftentimes people have the definition of respect very similarly, but other things that we can kind of understand about other people that we work with. Maybe this other person's door is shut because they're very busy and they just work better in silence. And so now I know that they're not being rude. I actually need to, keep my voice down so they can get their work done, or I'll try to, get to them later. So let's move on to the next one, being awareness. Now, it may seem a little bit difficult to teach people about self-awareness, but there are a few things that we can think about to kind of spark that personal journey that you can take to become more self-aware. And I really think that this is where the gap starts between our knowing and our doing. So first, you might think about becoming self-analytical. And some people are just not so self-aware, and maybe they don't think about their own actions. But as we become self-analytical, the best and first step that we can do is being prepared to resolve conflict and avoid contributing to incivility. Be aware of what we bring to the situation. So you could start with a personal inventory as a basis. Now I'll go on to my next slide here for a moment to show you, and I'm not going to go over all of these, but these are just some questions to kind of help spark that internal thought process and that internal self-analysis about where I actually stand with my behaviors and where I want to be as far as my civility. So I'll just go for a couple here. The third one there, do I depersonalize conflicts? And I say this a lot of times to supervisors because we always want to make sure that we are attacking the problem and not the person. If we start to attack the person, then it becomes very personal. We take offense, and we get very angry and very defensive very quickly. Another one, sort of the fourth one to the bottom, am I angered easily? Now this may be a question that you have to talk to a couple of different people about. Several years ago, when I was a little bit younger, I had several people, every once in a while somebody would come up to me and say, Sheri, what's wrong? You seem upset or you seem angry, and I didn't think I was. But I kind of came to the conclusion that, I think a lot and I analyze a lot, and I'm also a very animated person. And so sometimes my thoughts and my feelings were coming out into my face, and so I looked angry or upset, and I didn't mean to. And I didn't want somebody, kind of steering away from me because they thought I was angry all the time. And so that kind of helped spark me building my self-awareness to say, oh, okay, well maybe I shouldn't be letting my face wear all of these emotions all the time. And that last one there, do I feel a sense of entitlement? How much of the world do I feel like I deserve? How much of the world am I really walking around thinking that, do I control everything around me? Or does the world around me control me? So there might be a few questions that you can start with to think about and to work on your self-awareness and start that self-analyzation. So let's go back to the awareness slide here. I was talking a little bit about whether or not the world controls you or you control the world, and that's actually called internal versus external locus of control. Now, it really isn't good to be too far on either side of the spectrum, but someone who has a more internal locus of control, they believe that their behaviors and what they do controls their life. So if they want something done, they should be able to do it. Now, someone who's too far onto internal locus of control may have a hard time in the world in situations that they aren't in control of, or that they don't have control over everything. And so it can be very difficult for them to deal with those types of situations. Now, someone on the external locus of control, too far on that end, these are the people that I call the Eeyores in the world. These are people who think that the world happens to them and they don't have any control over what happens in their life. So it may be kind of interesting to figure out exactly where someone believes that their control is. And just a little bit of a tidbit here, know your strengths and your weaknesses. And this is really great for team building. And if you want an exercise or a resource, that's Strengths Finders 2.0. It's a cheap book. Everybody needs one. It's for an online self-assessment, but you can get it on Amazon, or you can go straight to their Strengths Finders 2.0, and you can get each book for around $15, something like that. But what's great about this self-assessment is you don't get anything negative. It gives you your top 5 strengths out of about 36 that they've identified, and they're all related to how you work. And so, for an example, one of mine is deliberation. Knowing that I think about things first before I make a decision. And so now I can communicate that I took, the Strengths Finders 2.0 helped me put into words about what deliberation is and how I work, and now I can communicate to my coworkers to say, yes, if you need something right away, I may not be able to make a very quick decision because I want as much information as possible and I need time to think about it. So it might be a cool little exercise for everybody to do in your team or your work group to find exactly what everybody's strengths are so that you can utilize those and really build your team up. Another part of awareness is, especially for supervisors, but for other people too, is what are your expectations? Have they been clearly communicated? Are they too high? Are they too low? Because this often tends to be one of the bigger catalysts for problems between supervisors and their employees. Oftentimes employees feel like, maybe my supervisor's expectations are too high, or maybe they just aren't clear and I'm not on the right path. And also few other pieces of awareness, being responsible in our demeanor in the workplace, how we present ourselves, and whether or not people can rely on us is very important as far as building a team and building that civil environment. And also being aware of someone's intentions versus our misperceptions. Again, what is their behavior operating off of? What are their needs? Did they intend to be rude? Did I perceive it as they're being rude and something else is kind of at hand? And that last one there on the awareness side, what are our hot buttons? What are our high potential incidents for civility? And so this can really be a trigger for us to think, I tend to get very angered very easily when I'm in traffic or whatever it is. And to talk about intentions versus misperceptions again very quickly, I'll tell you a little bit about the social attribution error. And I've brought this up a couple of times in our live workplace, but actually we'll move on to our next slide here. Okay, still the awareness of others. Social attribution error. And what the social attribution error states is that we tend to blame others for their behavior, but if we commit those same behaviors, then we have a good valid reason. Take, for example, the traveling in traffic again. I'm sure at one point in time we have all pulled out in front of somebody or, not used our turn signal or whatever may be the case. Now, if we do it, then we have every good, valid, justified excuse in the world. I didn't see you, I didn't mean to, I'm in a hurry, I'm sick, whatever the excuse may be. Now, if someone else commits those crimes or those crimes against society, then we tend to get very defensive about it. If somebody pulls out in front of us, oh, you're trying to hurt me, what are you doing, you can't drive. And so this is exactly what the social attribution error says, is that we're not taking in circumstantial evidence. So that can help us sometimes stop and think about what the situation is and how much of the situation we actually know before we start taking an action. We also want to think a little bit about how does somebody else process information. There are many different work styles, different communication styles, and what are your own communication or work styles? And so the better that we understand ourselves and how we process information, then we can better tell other people how to approach us with information in the work groups. And again, understanding what other people need from the interaction and what is at the core of the issue is really going to help us sort of define exactly what's going on in all the entirety of the situation. So let's move on to the next one. We won't do the perception activity since we're online here, but that last little piece there I wanted to give you is just a little tidbit of information and little thought to think about. Those around us might be in our autobiography, but we are not all on the same page. And that's really just to say that perceptions are 100% about what makes us who we are. Our experiences, our beliefs, our personalities, our individual strengths and our weaknesses, all of those things are going to be in play for what makes us who we are. If anybody is a fan of the show The Office, one of the main characters used to say that all the time, is what makes you, or why are you the way that you are? And so trying to understand a little bit about all of those things that we've put on there and what makes us who we are, the better we understand ourselves and the better we understand our own perception, we can usually try to communicate that to other people and try to understand other people's personalities and communication styles and perception as well. So let's move on to this next one. So here we have the 3 R's of civility: respect, restraint, and regard. So let's take a look at some of these skills and how we can all build in creating a little more civility around in our lives. You may think about redefining what means to be respectful. Consider doing this with your coworkers. Oftentimes what faculty members do in their classrooms in the very beginning of the semester is they sit down and they make ground rules together to say exactly, okay, what can everybody agree on to what respect is? What do other people consider to be respectful behavior towards each other? Some people are disrespectful simply because they can, and it gives them some instant gratification. So don't be afraid to let others know what behaviors you hold as respectful and disrespectful. So you'd be surprised at how much others around you will honor those behaviors once you express them. I truly believe that we get a lot of the respect that we give. The second one there being restraint. If you think of all our well-liked high officials, administrators, etc., people in government, they all kind of carry that restraint, and we admire them for that. So where could you choose, where you could choose to allow your emotions to lead your behaviors, because that is the quickest, easiest, and the thing that gives us the most immediate gratification. Restraint allows us to think about our reaction before executing it. So you could tell the person what you feel, and it may be that you're right, but choosing not to escalate the situation not only solves the issue more quickly, but people can hold you in high regard for proving your restraint. I don't want you to confuse restraint with stifling your self-expression. It's best to express your thoughts and your feelings. This, of course, builds trust and empathy and open communication and feedback, but we have to avoid doing it at someone else's expense. So we express our emotions, but doing so recklessly and with a brazen attitude will only contribute to that incivility. And that last one there being regard. Regard deals with some consideration for yourself as well as others. Do you want to be a life enhancer or a well poisoner? Are your words and actions lifting people up, or are we bringing them back down? So are you considering the needs of others as well expressing your own? And with some practice, we can develop the habit of considering the fact that our actions have consequences for others, and thinking about that before we execute our behaviors. And we're able to anticipate what those consequences could be and choose our actions accordingly. So let's move on to our last skills slide here. Listening is probably another aspect of civility that we all believe that we know, but so many of us don't practice it maybe as well as we should. So a few habits to develop here could be restating what the other person says. This lets them know that we were listening, and it ensures that you understand what they've said. And so this can open the door for some clarification if it's needed. And also, don't interrupt. It's the oldest rule, and it still holds true. When we interrupt, we shut the other person down by saying, what I have to say is more important. And this can easily escalate the situation from there. The second one there being empathy, and empathy is probably at the base of civility. With perspective, we take a moment to think about how the other person is feeling, and to let them know that we understand that feeling. Sometimes people just want to be validated and justified for how they feel. So make sure that you're maintaining someone's self-esteem when you're doing this. Don't put them down, even though, they may be the result of where they are, or they've done something wrong to bring the situation on themselves. Empathy can be positive or negative. Even if you disagree with someone, you can still empathize their feelings. So let's say, for example, if someone in graduate studies, a student comes forward, a week before graduation, and they haven't filled anything out to apply for graduation, and so now it's too late. Of course they're going to be upset, and of course they're going to be frustrated. But as customer service representatives, we don't want to put that blame, and again, we don't want to attack the person, we want to attack the problem. So oftentimes what we can do is justify and say, yes, this is a terrible situation to be in. However, this is the next step that we can take. So again, look at the problem and what is our next step and what can we do from there. That last one, letting go. Letting go of your hurt, your anger, and resentment can be a great benefit to you and those around you, because we tend to wear all of those feelings that when we carry them around for so long, we tend to just wear them outside and wear them on our faces. So we then start to assume that people have ill intent because we're dwelling on our negative experiences ourselves. And dwelling on those negative experiences sometimes prevents us from having future positive experiences. And so it's nothing that comes easily, of course, but just remember that letting go doesn't mean caring about others less. It means caring about yourself more, enough to choose to move on. So this may mean, for each individual, it may mean forgiveness or simply choosing not to dwell on past experiences. Again, this will sort of come a little bit from that internal versus external locus of control as well. Couple other pieces of information. Conflict management. There are tons of training materials and research studies done on conflict management. Of course, it could be a totally different, totally separate training, but here are a few key points that we can focus on to build our conflict management skills. Make sure you're always objectifying what is happening and why. Conflict between coworkers has probably escalated sometimes to personal attacks. So whether we are in the conflict or trying to deflate it, we have to get down to the basics of what caused the conflict in the first place. Are they really upset because she didn't turn off the coffee pot, or is it because about being irresponsible lately? And the next one there, depersonalize the situation. I've said this before, make sure that you avoid saying things like you always or he never, so avoid using superlatives and avoid being very accusatory. And also, avoid keeping score. This is the root of sometimes when we feel vengeance and can create some pretty hostile working environments. And when there's a larger problem, try involving everybody that it affects in finding a solution. And you can do this by using a fishbone diagram. It looks exactly like an arrow at first. And so on the head of it, near the triangle, you would put the problem. And so on each piece, you would draw a little fishbone from the left-hand side and put everybody's solution to the problem on each of it. And so it really gets everybody's opinion involved, everybody's concern onto one sheet of paper. It can really allow everybody to open up a little bit and say that, yes, my concerns and my issues are being addressed. And also consider 360-degree feedback. I know here at Eastern we have our performance evaluations for staff that are very top-down, but if you're a supervisor out there, then make sure that you're taking the time to ask for feedback back from your subordinates. Ask them from all the way around, and this is how we get 360-degree feedback. For those of us who are our coworkers, our vendors that we work with, our customers, and the people and superiors above us, so that we're getting everyone's perspective again. So let's talk a little bit about application. So with this, a great way to bring everyone on board with teamwork and civility is building ground rules together, and so that everybody can agree on them again. And so this works great in classes as well. But again, just real quick to add on that, people are more likely to buy into the ground rules because they've helped make them, and so they will be more likely to honor them. Work on building trust with each other, and again, that's a lot of where that support and responsibility comes from. Be consistent and keep your communication frequent. Be honest and be open as much as you can, and then start trusting others in return, because again, trust and respect are a lot of those things you get in return what you give. Don't forget to ask for feedback as well as giving it consistency, as we've said, and try to be consistent in all of your actions. If people notice that you're trying harder to build civil behaviors, then, we may fall back a time or two, but don't give up. and will only, giving up will only drop their opinion of you a little bit lower than what it was before. And always know you can always take advantages of your resources. As I was saying, other HR does have a formal grievance process, but what we're trying to do is make sure that we offer as much mediation before we get to that formal grievance process as possible. So you can come to us in HR. You can go to the Diversity Council, and their committee has a lot of information that we can get from. Take advantage of our EAP, which is our employee assistance program. This is through Access Wellness Group. I know we have a lot of EAP sessions that we try to offer. Sometimes it's through the ITV classroom. But with your benefits, you can get up to 6 times for free, 6 visits. They're there in Lexington off of Nicholasville Road. And if you want any information on them, then make sure you give me a call, and I'll be sure to get you some brochures and as much information to you as possible. And if things do get to an escalated or hostile situation, then we do have plenty of, our public safety officials, our EKU police, and you may also want to take a look at that faculty staff 911 guide. So on to the next application a little bit. Know exactly what we can control. And just a couple of things here. Pay attention to your sleep habits. There isn't any magic number for anybody. The key is just getting the amount of sleep that's right for you. The average may be between 7 and 9 hours, but make sure that you're being consistent with your sleep, and this means even on the weekends. Don't watch TV too close to bedtime, and personally, I would recommend not watching the news too close to bedtime. And again, knowing your hot buttons, know exactly what's going to set you off, and then determine what you can do about it, and knowing whether it's even really worth staying angry over. And in a world where there's information at our fingertips, and people expect to get in touch with us immediately through cell phones and email, and now there's email on our cell phones, we might be straining ourselves and wearing ourselves a little bit too thin. So take a moment and think about it, and consider setting a time where you don't check email, you don't check text, and you're not on your phone all the time. And if you need to let others know when that is, then do so, and you'd be surprised how many people can honor that. So again, clearly defining our expectations for what civility is. But again, come up with creative ways on how you might reward civil behavior. I know a lot of people take time to sort of do their own little team-based rewards, whether it's getting donuts in the morning, or if Leanna heard me talking about donuts for Healthy You at EKU, she might get me. So you may talk to Leanna about other different rewards that you can have. And on to that next piece there. Know what civility means to you, and discuss this with others around you, because again, you're going to gain that respect by giving it. So take a moment sometimes. If it seems like that civility is sort of rocky or a little out of control, then sit down with each other and figure out exactly what that mutual civility means to everyone around you. And of course, all of those skills and applying that will eventually lead to change. Now, don't think that just because, we've had this training and we've talked about this a little bit, don't think that you're going to wake up the next morning and you're going to be the total, the model citizen behavior for civility. But know that small actions lead to big change. When you have a large, long-term goal, the best way to keep it motivated and to keep others buy-in in this is to achieve smaller goals. And so as they see little changes happening, then they're more likely to continue those small actions that lead to immediate change, and then build those to a sustainable change in behaviors. So hopefully today has given you some idea of how to close the gap between what we know and what we do. But it won't start until we take the first step towards changing our behaviors. And if we continue to say, well, it isn't me, then we will simply achieve nothing. And I'll give you a quick blurb on that. I did see another statistic out there that said that 89% of people in the workforce said that civility is just dead. It's just done. It's hopeless. We're terrible to each other out there. And that was 89%. Now, 90% of the same people of the same survey and same respondents said, well, it isn't me. And so again, maybe that self-awareness is possibly what that little gap is. So as blunt as it may sound, it comes down to either being civil or being uncivil, which makes it either you're a part of a solution or you're part of a problem. And I know that everyone's intentions are good. We just have to make sure that we express those and let other people know what those are. And just to wrap up a little bit, I saw this, I'll be honest with you, I saw this on a bumper sticker, but I loved it so much that I had to incorporate it. It says, humankind, be both. Thank you guys so much, and if you need anything else or have any other ideas that are needs for training, be sure to give me a call, or you can email me. I'm at 859-622-8874, or you can email me at Sheri, SHERI, .Rogers, ROGERS, at EKU.edu. Take care.